I'm Shelley Strickland, Vice President for Philanthropy here at the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation. So great to see all of you here today. We're expecting more, and we might have them, and if not, I'm glad to see some familiar faces in the room and some new ones. When we set this February date, I was thinking, oh my goodness, we might have weather issues, and instead we just had some construction issues. So forgive our kind of stuff around and maybe the quality of the restrooms if you need to use them, which are in the lobby, but it's a good problem to have. Under the 5 years of Neil's leadership, our assets have grown by 96%, and that's from gifting that's 2.5-fold over. And in that time, we've not increased staff size until now. And so, and some of that's due to some private support as well. So one of the staff being hired, and the reason for the new office construction that might be of interest to you, is the director of the Ann Arbor Entrepreneurs Fund. So this new permanent endowed fund here at the Community Foundation is made possible by entrepreneurs who have pledged either 1% of their ownership in a business venture or 1% of their carried interest from a venture capital fund. And I think it's a real testament to our community and the type of people in this community that they want to leave a lasting impact, even if their company ultimately takes them elsewhere. But Neil is especially excited about this director because he has secured 19 commitments to that fund already. And so he's ready to have somebody else to take on that work. So that person will hopefully be hired here soon. So we just want to be a resource for you in many of those ways. So I shared new advisor resources for you, including how to have the charitable conversation, and we're finding more ways like the Entrepreneurs Fund and impact investing eventually and other things that I think could be of interest to your clients. So we will also be sharing a new quarterly newsletter with information for you that I think will be helpful. And so look for that this spring, as well as later this year, some recognition on our website and a special event for advisors who have referred to us. Regardless of the outcome, we just like having the conversation, and even if we're not the best solution, our promise to you and to your clients is that we're going to help them make a more educated decision and be more informed about what's happening in this community, because that's our role. And so I know you're going to learn a lot today. So without further ado, we're going to kick it off here. And can we get the lights?
We're in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and this is the Ann Arbor Art Center. We're a 107-year-old organization. We are a fine art organization that serves the downtown local community.
We're an Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation. We're a foundation dedicated to improving the quality of life in Washington. We have donors who basically want to support the community in general, and they give to some of our broadest funds. We have other donors who have specific passions. So education is their passion. They may have established a scholarship fund. We have funds for the environment, for the arts, for human services, and social safety net, of course, for civic engagement, and literally dozens of other subjects. We offer a lot of different avenues for donors to find a way to give back.
One of the big projects that we had was renovating the 3rd floor because we were adding some new arts programming that combined art and technology. We had a builder that came in, and they were going to do the 3rd floor in 3 sections. Well, from a cost efficiency standpoint, it made more sense to do more at one time rather than break it up into 3. I had some conversation with Neil Hajra, who's a wonderful leader of that organization, and Neil has a business background, and he had talked about, more than just being a granting organization, what if they could get involved and provide low-cost loans for community nonprofit organizations. It was exactly what we needed, so we got together. They turned that around in less than a week, and we were able to get all of the work done.
There's a whole range of organizations that can benefit from impact investing. They include examples like our recent loan to the Ann Arbor Art Center that's using it to accelerate some capital projects. There's a whole other group of organizations that aren't nonprofits that can also benefit from impact investing.
One example is a for-profit business that's employing individuals in a distressed community, or it could be a business that's participating in the redevelopment of a distressed downtown area. So impact investing actually represents a much wider spectrum of possibilities than traditional rental.
Because the space was now so beautiful, we had so many more facility rentals that we were able to pay the loan off within about 3 months.
The next generation of donors is really interested in how foundations use their capital for things beyond grants. They're asking all the right questions on what are we doing for our communities beyond our traditional grant making. So we think that impact investing will make us even more appealing as a partner to a large generation of new philanthropists that are in our area and that want to see us make the most of our capital.
So we've gone from $600,000 organization to a $1.2 million organization in a matter of 3.5 years. And I have to attribute a lot of that early support. They believed in me early on. It was that belief in me that really helped set the Arts Center on an amazing trajectory of success.
So as you can see, that video was made possible by the Council of Michigan Foundations, or CMF, and they are a wonderful resource that we can in turn share with you on matters of all kinds of both federal, state, and local work around charitable giving, changes in policy. Neil is on their board, and our guest speaker today is actually courtesy of CMF. In 2017, CMF appointed Jennifer Oertel as its first ever expert in residence in impact investing, with the charge of leading efforts to further develop and support Michigan's impact investing ecosystem. And she's also been engaged by a national organization to design a framework to advance the impact investing ecosystem across the country. So in the invitation, we listed Jennifer's CMF affiliation, but did not note her other professional role, as it was in the process of changing from her being a shareholder at Jaffe to bringing her background in securities law, private equity, and mergers and acquisitions to Ann Arbor. So she is now our neighbor at Bodman. And we have a couple colleagues here, Aaron and Kelly, also from Bodman. And Jennifer has an amazing background. I'm going to read all this. That includes using her corporate law and governance skills to assist family and corporate foundations, community foundations like us, public charities, regional associations, trade and labor organizations, chambers of commerce, religious organizations, and other tax-exempt organizations, as well as impact investors, impact funds, and social enterprises in all aspects of their business. So talk about comprehensive knowledge. We're honored that she's here to share that with you today. So Jennifer, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kelly. A little bit more about the Expert in Residence program. So I say my role is sort of being a professional busybody, kind of knowing what's going on, so I'm able to connect people with what's going on maybe in different areas of the state. It happened in 1 week where 4 of my clients were all saying, you know, we're investigating an impact investment in a particular fund to fund things like businesses. So I was able to connect them with their permission, of course, and say, maybe you guys want to share due diligence. Maybe you want to talk about this together. As a way to just sort of capitalize on all of our resources and collaboration. So I'm available, anyone within Michigan or who's looking to make impact investments in Michigan. So you should feel free to reach out. If your clients reach out, I don't try to steal clients. I say, if you have legal representation, I'm happy to talk to your attorney to sort of guide them through this process, help them know, like, no, this isn't malpractice. Right, this is maybe something you haven't heard of before, but this is really a thing, and we've been doing it for a while. And so, you know, please feel free to contact me for that. So, impact investing. The term was coined, I think, 2009. It's been going on for a while before that. And you know, one of the challenges is we actually don't have a great lexicon. So, I've given you a couple of examples of definition. So it means of using capital to drive financial value, social and or environmental impact at the same time, simultaneously. Or the GIN network below, investments made into companies, organizations, and funds with the intention to generate measurable social and environmental impact alongside a financial return. And I really like the end of this. They can be made into emerging developed markets target a range of returns from below market to market rate to above market. And we'll talk a little bit later about how do these investments do, because you've heard there are some naysayers out there, and you've heard people say like, but I need to protect my endowment, right? Like we're spending 95% of our endowments are sitting doing whatever they're doing, if we're only paying attention to the return in large cases, and 5% we're doing our charitable acts with, right, in this field. So you've got the 5% intentionally invested or contributed. The 95% is doing whatever it's doing, we're just caring about the returns, right? That's the traditional model. And in some cases, that 95% is actually undoing the 5%. You know, there was an example of the Gates Foundation a few years ago when a reporter with too much time on his hands went through their 990PF and saw that even though they're giving money toward environmental justice, they had, I think it was like $2 billion in fracking and fossil fuels and other things that most people generally agree are not good for the environment, which that's a rounding error for Gates, right, given their size. But still, you know, are we being consistent, right? And are we undoing the good that we're trying to do? The other thing with impact investing, so I sort of think of it as when you make a grant, hopefully you're making some social impact with that grant, but it's a negative 100% return, right? You have to find more money to make that same grant the next year to do the same good. In impact investing, you are expecting a return of that money or even on that money through a loan, through an equity investment, and it's kind of recharging the giving pool. And we'll go into some examples of how that happens. Just to share the alphabet soup, a lot of you have probably heard about a lot of these. CSR, corporate social responsibility, SR, socially responsible investment, mission-related investing, ESG, environmental, social, and governance, PRI, program-related investment, SIB, social impact bonds. I should have added to that PFS, pay for success, which is what a lot of people say now for those programs. All of these you kind of hear within the same lexicon of impact investing. And some of the big funds that you hear about that people say like, oh, they're an impact investing fund, they're really more of an ESG, environmental, social, and governance. You know, that really focuses on the operations of the company. The way I define, again, we don't have a generally accepted definition. The way I define it, Council of Michigan Foundations, we like to think of impact investing. It's a bit more intentional. It's focusing on the products or services offered by the companies instead of just how they're doing business. Although we all agree that putting focus on any of these things is a good thing, right? Owning what you own and paying some attention to where your dollars are sleeping at night and what they're doing is a good thing. So some examples of impact investments. Neil's going to talk a little bit more about what the Community Foundation has done. I love the video. And the Council of Michigan Foundations, by the way, on their website, michiganfoundations.org, we have 8 videos now. Different examples around the state, so you can share them with your clients. It's not behind the member login. So that is open. I also write a blog that's there, the A to Z's of impact investing. I have some curated resources, so please feel free to use that. We have some opportunity zone materials there too. If any of you, I'm sure a lot of you have heard from your clients about, there's a lot of buzz around opportunity zones. So it's all on michiganfoundations.org. But some examples of impact investment. So there was we had a charity that's working with people with barriers to entry. So returning citizens who've been in prison, or people who have physical or mental challenges, even like a middle-aged woman who got merged out of banking and then couldn't find a job because of age discrimination otherwise. So they actually, they opened a janitorial company because they had a government building. And when you have a government building, they're very strict on how you take care of that. And they kind of became expert in knowing what government requirements are. So then they opened a janitorial company that was servicing these businesses and commercial rates. So not only was that money then going back to feed their charitable activities, but it was also employing their clients, right? They're trying to get these people placed in jobs. So it's sort of a double impact. And an impact investment was made, a low interest loan was made to just help them get started with that. And of course it's revenue generating, so they can pay it back. I also have a neat client, medical device company creating technologies for the developing world, where you're spinning, I think you know them, Angela, spinning blood, separating blood, so you can do it in rural India and other areas where you might not have electricity. A fixed income impact bond fund targeting the Barclays Ag. I kind of threw this in here as a shameless plug. because we at Council of Michigan Foundations got community capital management they have a $7 billion, I think, publicly traded fixed income bond fund. What we got them to do, though, was for Michigan, we got them to lower their minimum investment to $100,000 so that community foundations and our smaller organizations around the state would be able to invest. With that $100,000, you can either target an impact theme, so we want to invest in low-income housing, which would be activated anywhere around the country, or you can target down to a zip code. And so that's created a lot of bragging rights for people to say, our investments, most people have fixed income in their portfolio, but we can actually say this money helped you to fund this project here, and it gives you bragging rights. Yet they were the first fund to be Morningstar rated, and it's fixed income, and it targets market rate for fixed income. So that's just another example. Another one I like to talk about, the Fisher Foundation made a program-related investment to Hebrew Free Loan. They made a $200,000 program-related investment, which that's a defined term in the tax code for a private foundation, so it counted for their 5% that they have to give out every year. In this case, they did a 0% loan, but it wouldn't have to be a 0%. Hebrew Free Loan then took those dollars and in 5 years doubled the impact. They lent out $400,000 to people in need for things like a used car. 62 used cars they financed, because really that, especially outside of Ann Arbor, where we don't have really great transportation, that's really someone's key to increasing their incomes. Putting ramps on homes so people can age in place. They funded a bunch of adoption and in vitro fertilization. And out of those $400,000 in loans, they only they had $2,000 that was not repaid, and that was because the gentleman passed away. They chose not to follow the grieving family and try to collect on that. So it's some neat examples, and again, look at the videos on the CMS website for more. Just some facts and figures. So I had mentioned the Global Impact Investing Network based out of New York. They had their definition. They were sort of early on in this field. They're in their 7th year of an annual report that's surveying impact investors around the world. So this is global numbers. So the last year's report that came out in April sized the market at $502 billion, again, worldwide. 266 respondents had managed $239 billion in impact investments assets in 2019, and expected to grow that 13% in 2019. So we'll see in a couple months if that actually happened. But it has happened. So in the 7 years, it's grown year after year after year. And respondents made over 13,000 deals, so $33 billion, and they plan to do 2,000 more deals with an additional $4 billion, so $37 billion in 2019. Of these respondents, it's upright. Whenever you see a survey, you can make numbers say what you want them to say, so it's good to know sort of where they come from. So 2/3 of these were fund managers, and the remainder are foundations, banks, development finance institutions. And again, these are worldwide numbers, but you'll note that 45% were in the US and Canada, and they're making most of their investments in the US and Canada as well. And out of those 266 respondents, 2/3 only make impact investments. So you've probably heard names of some of the large impact funds, and they're out there, and you can find them if you're looking for investments on behalf of your clients. And their impact objectives, social, environmental, 56% only social, 36 are only environmental, 7, which has really kind of come down, not sure why. But people now are targeting the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. That's been, impact investing has been touted as this way where we can grow. Each year there are billions of dollars worldwide of charitable assets available, but there's trillions of dollars of need, right? So how do we get between these billions to trillions? And what we in impact investing for the past decade have been talking about, and people that talk about meeting the SDGs, we postulate that if you grab just a small portion of the investable assets, right, which there are trillions of, then that will help us bridge that gap and to meet some of these needs. So how do these things perform, right? You have Larry Kramer from the Hewlett Foundation saying, we need to protect, at all costs, we just have to protect our 95%, and, we're not going to monkey around with any of this stuff. Of the respondents, 66% target market rate returns, 19 target close to market, and over 90% reported that their returns are in line or exceed both their impact and their financial expectations. So they perform, and we have more, I used to work with VCs for years, and we all know if you're in that world, one out of very few deals actually make it right to the pure for-profit world, and we're finding more and more evidence that actually deals that have a bit of a social aspect to them fare better, and they're doing in this world of conscious capitalism and all these other movements we have going on. So, why is this important to all of you? As professional advisors, I think it's important to know what do your clients want, right? Like, why do we care about this? So there's a Wall Street Journal article, maybe Neil can talk about, because I actually didn't see it, but it was in the invitation. So there's more recent numbers about how clients, in some study, clients are wanting their professional advisors to talk to them about impact investing. This was from 2013, so it's a little old, but it still holds true. This is only with respect to philanthropy, but I think it's similar with impact investing. So you can see in the numbers, 71% of advisors think they discuss philanthropy with their clients, but only 55% of clients think their advisors did. Many of them say that the discussions deepen their advisor relationship or have built the relationship. There's another stat that's not in here, though, that something like 70% of the advisors thought their clients don't want them to talk about their specialized. We lawyers we bill by the hour, and we think our clients just want us to get to the point. But there was, 66, so 70% of the advisors think their clients don't want them to address. In this case, it was philanthropy, but 66% of clients said, yeah, we'd love to hear about that. So, it's just an interesting dynamic where we're not quite having a meeting of the minds here. But also a very recent report that came out last year, Tonic. We have Gin, and Tonic is another organization. But millennials impact investment. So that was a study showing, and I know the Community Foundation talked about this, that millennials, right, they care about different things. We've got this great, is it $56 trillion still wealth shift coming from the boomers to the millennials? So if you want, as clients, the children and grandchildren of your current clients, we need to do things differently, right? They think differently than the older generation. And so this report also found it's still a little bit more talk than walk, even with millennials, but a lot of them don't have the money yet, right? And they're struggling, they're raising kids, but they care about things, or they care about consumer products that have a positive social impact, or that at least don't have a negative social impact. So it's really at the forefront. Just real quick on legal consideration. So when you're doing deals, when you're issuing equity, or if you have a fund, you're trying to pool capital together in an investment vehicle, that involves the security laws. Private foundations have special rules that apply to them, and some of these also apply to donor-advised funds after the Pension Protection Act. So program-related investment, I mentioned that in the Fisher Foundation to Hebrew Free Loan. If a foundation makes an investment that is primarily for charitable purposes and no significant aspect is accretion of capital or appreciation of assets, it will count as a grant toward the 5%. In community foundations or charities, we talk about PRIs. That's really a term of art from the tax code, though, section 4945. So we really, we like to call those programmatic investments, because as you'll see even more, the community foundation is a charitable funder, has also done a lot of this work. Jeopardizing investments, that's a private foundation or donor advised fund thing. Excess business holdings rules is another. Unrelated business taxable income, some holdings will generate, even a charitable as a tax-exempt entity, but some holdings are going to generate taxable income. And again, I always say if you're making money, it's not a bad thing to pay some taxes, but you just need to be aware of that. An UPMIF of the Prudent Management of Institutional Funds Act applies to private foundations and charities. So that just means you have to have a diversified portfolio. I had someone do some research. I was not able to find anyone who got in trouble in any state by an attorney general for breaching UPMIFA with respect to impact investing. Like if you're trying to pocket money, right, if there's something that's not quite right, people have gotten in trouble. Trustees sometimes get in trouble by the beneficiaries. But pure sort of good-hearted, we're going to maximize, we're going to take some of our 95% endowment and intentionally invest it to create good in our community. I've not seen, could be there are things that aren't reported, but we couldn't find anything that was reported where someone got in trouble. that is one of the barriers, right? People are risk averse. Advisors are risk averse. If the advisors aren't really knowledgeable, they might steer clients away. Private foundations especially are very risk averse. Boards, in many cases, even charitable organizations are risk averse. So it's sort of what we're trying to do here, just spread this knowledge and education that really, go ahead and do it, right? Let's not keep doing, we've been doing the same thing we've been doing all these decades, and it's not really moving the needle as much as we could. Oh, here's our legal disclaimer. This is Bodman's legal disclaimer. Lovely. So I think we were going to hold our questions till the end. I can stick around a little bit before I have to head out. So if anyone has questions, let me know, and we'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. And I just want to thank Jennifer. She's been a wonderful counsel and guide for us in our own journey that I'm going to tell you about, actually. I actually arrived at the foundation, now it's 9 years ago. I realized something very quickly. Most people saw foundations as a bundle of grants waiting to get released. And I saw foundation as a bundle of capital ready to be leveraged. And so from the time I got to the foundation and before I was CEO, we just started posing questions. Are there other ways we can leverage the capital within our institution to enhance the good we're already doing? So grants are fantastic. It's always going to be our bread and butter, right? And yet I saw the endowment and I said, maybe there's ways that we don't put at risk the perpetuity of our funds, because frankly, that's our promise to donors. We can never compromise perpetuity. But maybe we could preserve perpetuity and put that money to work towards our mission while generating the returns that we needed. And so the video you saw about Marie in the Art Center, internally, that was a proof of concept effort. It wasn't a huge new program. We didn't say we're going to start making $10,000 loans, right, to nonprofits. We wanted to show the board that there was a market for this and that we would get our money back and that there was a pathway to thinking differently. And so the loan we made was simply a waypoint to the vision of leveraging our endowment, because the loan was with grant dollars. So the risk was actually very low, because as Jennifer said, once you send a grant out, it's negative 100%, right? And you're instead are waiting for the social impact. But with Marie, we got the money back and we made a great social impact through the Ann Arbor Art Center. And so after that proof of concept really got the board to lean forward, we engaged in several years, actually, a long time of benchmarking. And we also hold it at the foundation that very few ideas are actually new or novel. So we set out to find all of the other institutions around the country who had already done this, some for 5 years, some for 20 years. And then we invited them in. We had them video conference in, we had them visit, we had Council of Michigan Foundation experts come and talk to our board about this isn't radical, this isn't new, it is sustainable, and it works. And I'll never forget the moment when 2 years into our learning journey, a trustee finally said, why are we still talking about this? Why aren't we doing this? And I said, well, I've been waiting for 2 years for at least one trustee to say that. And that pivoted the board to action. Now remember, perpetuity is always at the heart of what we do. And so it was a very prudent first step. The board passed a policy based on benchmarking many other policies that 1% of our permanent endowment, which at the time was 1.3 million, it's now 1.5 million, would be dedicated to impact investing. And I'm just going to digress just for a second to talk about what I mean when we say impact investing. The mission of the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation is to enrich the quality of life in Washtenaw County. So what that tells you is we have drawn an awfully artificial box around a very small geography when it comes to prudent investment, and we've said that's our mission. So while there are a lot of products out there that are national in scope, none of those actually advance our mission of enriching the quality of life in Washtenaw County. And so we knew that we had to start prudent because there was no real vibrant ecosystem locally. To concentrate that much risk in such a small area was going to be our next challenge. And so that's where we actually decided we couldn't outsource the core of this work. So our impact investing committee is actually composed of all trustees, including representatives of our investment finance committee. And by the way, I want to call out Mark. He is on our investment finance committee. And his colleague, Fernando Ortiz, who many of you know from Vallejo, is the chair of our investment finance committee and also on the impact investing committee, along with 4 other trustees. And they were charged with the broader board to start defining how we could get into this activity in a prudent way that kept our promises to donors to maintain perpetuity. So thanks to the Council of Michigan Foundations, the first move we made was to deploy the $1.3 million through the CCM fund that Jennifer described. And their promise to us was within 2 years, all of that money would go from their national pool down to local deployment within Washtenaw County. There was enough business activity going on in Washtenaw County to do that. In some regions, I know they say 50%. And so we have been referring to that internally as Impact Light, right? It's a highly rated Morningstar portfolio. It's de-risked across the whole country, and yet it is local deployment. So what we said was that's going to be a placeholder for more local, more targeted investments that have a more tangible and measurable social or environmental impact alongside that market return that we need. And by the way, we do fall into that market return category, right? We talk a lot about CPI +5 around here because it's our job to maintain the inflation-adjusted spending power of the 600 charitable funds that we steward. And so we do need to, in a blended way, of course, and diversified, achieve a market rate net return, but we can be patient about it because it's only 1% of our portfolio. What we are engaging now is in our next step of actually learning more about our own ecosystem, right? We have to be an effective investor and we cannot do it with $1.5 million. The scale is just not there. So what does that mean? It means we need allies. We need other investors who are investing alongside us so we can de-risk each other and also magnify impact. But to do that, we actually have to know how people are investing in Washtenaw County. And that's where we actually were in conversations with the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation for a year because they were posing a question. How do they as a foundation enable their regions in Southeast Michigan and Western New York to engage in impact investing? And as we talked more, they said, hey, what you guys are doing could be our template for other places. So we actually, we commissioned the Urban Institute, a national firm, to scrape all the public data available around investment activities in Washtenaw County. But then thanks to the Wilson Foundation support, we actually paired that by commissioning Revalue and Angela Barbash, thank you, Angela, to do a granular set of surveys, and also with Emily and Entry Point, who are survey data experts, but really being led by Angela and Revalue, to really understand who's investing where and what and how in Washtenaw County. Once we have that report done in the summer, we are really looking forward to talking to all of you because here's the thing you have to remember. We're not an investment advisor. That's not our job. That's not what we do. We work with charitable assets, and that's all we do. But we can partner with other investors where we have common crossover interest in impact investing, or maybe they're investments that weren't thought of as impact investing, but they're creating new businesses on the east side of the county, for example. So I have a feeling what's going to emerge out of this work that we're doing is an idea for all of you what's going on in Washtenaw County. But for us, it's who are the partners we can work with and team up with in order to make collectively much larger investments. And so I mentioned the study and work that Angela and Revalue are leading. I do want to emphasize that you can actually be a part of this, and just as important, we're not just talking to institutional advisors. We want to hear from individuals who are investing in Washtenaw County. Man, a lot of our trustees talk about this, right? They have investments in local businesses. We want to hear from individuals doing that, and not just those who are saying, yep, all I'm doing is purely social impact, and that's all I'm thinking about is where is the capital going and where are there opportunities? And so it comes through slightly small here, but it's aacf.org/impact-through-insight. If you click on that, you'll be taken to a blog post that we published that talks about Angela's work and then gives some links to some of the surveys that have been published for institutional and individual investors. And so I just want to emphasize again, so our vision is that more of our endowment is making more of a social and environmental impact along with our grants and along with our scholarships. So our whole interest here is to magnify the impact of the charitable capital that's under our stewardship. But the key is our aha moment was, oh, we can't do that alone. No matter how big we get, it'll never be big enough unless we team up with a lot of other institutions. And so that, Shelley, do you want to do any last words?
No, except I think we'll open it up for questions. I will share Jennifer's slides. I can share the WSJ article that went out, and then the results of this, the very important part is this is all confidential. Everything, so the results will be shared back with you. This is in your best interest to encourage participation because this will be the first comprehensive mapping of the local ecosystem here. And so we want to share those results back out with you. So please participate and share that. And again, there's many links, including a public one. What questions do you have for Jennifer Oertel?
I've asked her my 1,000 questions already. So.
I should mention too, one thing through CMF is we did some convenings in November. We're sifting through that data and we're going to start, our ecosystem hub is a 4-leaf clover that Elizabeth Garlow came up with. I was thinking a daisy, but 4-leaf clover is better. And so we have sort of Council Michigan Foundations at the middle, just facilitating communications flow. But we have 4 groups of stakeholders, so sort of professional advisors, investors, investees, and then sort of the educators and policymakers, people working on policy. And so we're trying to activate each of those 4 leaves so that people within those groups, like all of you, that tend to see each other, can talk to each other and start sharing information and hopefully trying to, get this, further this ecosystem development and get some more action and actual deals happening. And then we're going to have people volunteer to be connectors. And so you're working in your groups and we're facilitating communications flow. So it's going to come in to CMF and then we're going to put it back out to everyone to hopefully break through these silos. We're also a really large state, so that can be challenging, and we're hoping that this will help sort of connect people, because as Neil said, it's hard to do this alone. The transaction costs are high, which has been a barrier to this. And people don't know the art of the possible either. So that's why we're trying to share more and more stories.
Well, just to get the questions flowing, let me give you 2 examples of deals we're eyeballing. One is actually a statewide group called Michigan Women Forward that specializes in deploying business loans to women and women of color who are starting up or trying to grow their small businesses. And we know there is a lack of business creation on the east side of the county. And so we're looking at some of the notes they're starting to issue to mostly foundations, I think, to fund that work. And that it's a great combination of social return with some kind of market rate return. So we're in the diligence phase with that. We are looking at a lot of affordable housing opportunities as well. And that's where actually the prudence comes in. Some of those are government-backed opportunities, and therefore we're not at the same risk profile as with some of the other opportunities we're looking at. And some of those do offer pretty good market rate returns and smack dab crossover with our deep work on the grant making side around affordable housing, which is at a crisis level in Ann Arbor area as well as so many other places around the country. So those are 2 areas we're actively looking in and actually actively having conversations with institutions that are leading that work. So.
And a shameless plug for the Community Foundation. If you have clients that are risk-averse foundations, right, a private foundation really needs to do things through a charity in most cases without jumping through hoops and doing a lot of record keeping called expenditure responsibility, have a conversation with a community foundation, because there are a lot of ways that can be facilitated through different funds. We have a lot of creative ways that are totally legal, but will make them feel more comfortable to do, kind of venture out, or at least dip their toe in the water of these sort of, what might be new territory for a lot of people.
Rob, did you have a question?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get a handle on is, Neil, when you're saying you're looking for partners in impact investing, what does that look like? Can you give us some examples of, is it institutions, is it individuals, is it foundations?
So yes, and yes, okay. Right? And here's why, Rob. So, we need a diversified portfolio, but we only have $1.5 million right now. Now, if we're successful over time, maybe it becomes 2% or 3%, right? Who knows where that projects to? But to have a diversified portfolio with such a small amount of money means we will never have the magnitude on our own to sort of spur or be lead investor in a lot of these opportunities. But man, what if there were 3 or 4 other investors who are interested? And maybe it's a regional foundation, maybe it's a local investor who just wants to invest locally. And I've talked to some of you about your clients who are interested in that, right? Maybe it's an institutional investor, right? For some reason wants to invest, in Washtenaw County. And so, if I fast forward 5 or 10 years, my hope is there's actually this sort of myriad of different coalitions depending on what the deal is, right? And we, the foundation, our goal is to be a very small part of these, right? Because if you look at the markets, right, the investment markets are so huge, we'll never be more than a small part if we're successful. Does that help? Yeah. In terms of how we structure, so from our perspective, we want to find intermediaries who will be the sort of the leaders of these deals, structuring and then managing them. So I also want to be clear, we are adding staff, but we are not going to build a large sort of investment specialist shop at the foundation. It's just not a good fit for who we are. And we also think there's going to be enough of you out there who might be able to lead that work, and we can leverage it instead of building that all ourselves, which I just don't think is sustainable.
Even the huge foundations have maybe 1 or 1.5 FTEs doing impact investing work. And that's the challenge. Just like with philanthropy, we're seeing a smaller number of really larger grants just because it's in most cases. Now, community foundations are awesome. As you know, they really have their finger on the pulse of what's going on in the communities. But the larger foundations just have, people are busy and they need to get this money out the door. And so we're seeing a smaller number of really larger grants. And that's the way that impact investing is going as well, just because they just don't have the bodies to do the work, literally. And so we're looking at ways, and part of what Council Michigan Foundations is trying to do is to facilitate this collaboration like venture capitalists do, right? They syndicate deals, you have the lead investor model. A lot of foundations have been reticent to do that yet at Michigan Foundations, but we're still working on that, just encouraging some leadership so that we can follow behind them. And I think Neil's process was very interesting because he's a lawyer. I don't know if you know that. Are you out with that? He's a reform lawyer, and he went through a very methodical process with his board, which is really awesome. Other people, community foundation leaders across the state, have just found this cool need in their community, like, hey, we don't qualify for MISHDA housing because we're so rural, we don't even, we can't even get those dollars, so we need to do something. And so they're just seeing a need, and they're finding a unique way to fill that need that doesn't necessarily involve only grant making. And so they're not even labeling it first. In some cases, people have been really excited about the deals that have happened and the results that they've seen in their communities. And someone mentions like, oh, that was our first impact investment, and everybody freaks out on the board, right? Like, wait, we don't do that. So, it's just, we're still at a really interesting time, but we're seeing a lot of, this stuff's been going on for decades. The Muskegon Community Foundation did something in the 70s. They bought the local theater because often it's the community theater that's sort of a great asset, but also an eyesore, right? If it becomes abandoned. And so community foundations across the state have been saving their theaters for a long time, but not calling it impact investing.
Yeah, totally.
So is there a minimum for an individual to get involved? Investment?
So it depends on the deal. We're not a platform for flowing individual money through to investors. We're not an investment advisor. None of those we don't play in that regulatory space. So it depends. So for, Jennifer mentions Michigan Women's Forward. I forget what their minimum is. Jamie, is it?
Probably about 250.
Yeah, and so some of these are, more of the institutionally directed, but you don't have to be an institution, right, to do that. If there's a lead investor who creates a platform that enables participation at lower levels, that's a possibility too. But to Jennifer's point, none of this has been built yet. The report that's going to emanate from Angela's work that she's leading is going to start telling us where there's opportunities to start building what I think of as the scaffolding for all this, which literally doesn't exist right now. So
some of my favorite ones are below market impact investments, but we've done a lot of those, especially in Detroit. Our group of people from the same religious organization got together and they said, you give me $2,000 a year over 3 years and we're going to do something with it. So they raise a couple $100,000 and they do workforce development. So they do investments in urban farms, organizations that are employing homeless people, taking them out of the shelters, giving them gainful employment and training. And so in this one example, which was one of the first sort of local impact funds, so anyone can get in pretty much, $250,000 generated, I think 275 jobs the first year. Don't quote me on that, but it was a significant, not a ton of money if you think in the investment world, but they seeded 6 different organizations that were doing workforce development, and were able to sort of carry out that impact and follow it through, not just to the output numbers, but sort of what's that ripple effect, right? We're getting people in sustainable housing and their children aren't missing school and they're not moving school to school. So those are some of the ones that are very accessible to anybody, and they're some of my favorite, but you can see just a lot of good generated with the little stuff. Angela's working too with National Community NC3. That movement is a related movement, not exactly only social impact focused, but getting individuals, right? Typically because of the securities laws, only accredited investors, $1 million in net worth, $250,000 in income, it's sort of higher net worth people have the ability generally to invest. So what Angela and NC3 are working on, and Chris Miller out of Adrian, are trying to encourage more typical people, right, to be able to invest in their community. And we had the Mile Act in Michigan that came through several years ago, but we still haven't seen in equity crowdfunding, but part because of the government misunderstanding, I think. Our forerunners in that space had a lot of attention they probably didn't want from the government at first. So that's still a slower movement. That's something we're also trying to encourage. And they've done some cool stuff in DC, buying a building on H Street and letting the community, if you invest $10 in this building, you get to have a vote of what goes in here. Is it a Starbucks, or is it a mom and pop coffee shop, or is it a retail outlet? And that's really a way to get the community excited, and they feel invested. When they go buy a cup of coffee, they feel like I'm repaying myself, right? I'm invested. And so it goes way beyond the financial in that case, right? You're kind of creating community around it.
I can tell the story of a specific local example if you'd all like to know. So hi, everyone, I'm Angela. How many of you are familiar with Viridian at County Farm Park or near the County Farm Park location on Washtenaw? So this is a development that's going in that is a partnership with Avalon Housing. Thrive is the development partner that is doing the market rate housing, and Avalon is establishing permanent housing for a chronically homeless population. And so Thrive put up a community capital raise on a website called Local Stake. They raised $500,000. There are about 200 in commitments into that 500. They're raising that from the community. I think the minimum is $2,000. This is obviously not a solicitation for investment. I should say that out of the gate.
You need your disclaimer.
Right. Yeah. But the raise is public. You can go see the documents. You can express interest, which is not a commitment to invest, but just saying you're interested, and see the deal docs. They didn't have to go to the community for the capital. They had the capital lined up, about $10 million. So $500,000 is really a small amount compared to the total development size. But for them, it was a proof of concept to the community to show other development partners that this type of deal could be done. Not only raising part of the capital from the community itself, but also partnering with a nonprofit partner to create a mixed income development that has got energy efficiency as a bedrock, bringing a farmer's market to this permanent housing population, all of that.
Yeah, and it's equally important as our commitment is to perpetuity, it is also to always end on time. Thanks, Angela. So please join us in thanking Jennifer for her expertise.